Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'd like just to say a very few words of framing for today, a little bit about the plenary yesterday and what I myself hoped to be conveying in that, and a little bit about the background to today's agenda. The plenary was, of course, as everybody recognised, a moment of what you might call gear change in the life of the conference. We'd had a fairly intensive experience of gathering together, praying together, and deliberately not engaging with a business agenda. But yesterday was the point at which we had to be clearer about the methods we were using, why we were using them, and what the processes would be to arrive at some sort of statement, some sort of reflection that could claim to speak for the whole conference. So in what I was saying yesterday, I had 2 or 3 thoughts particularly in mind. One was to say something about the process we've adopted, the much discussed Indaba process. And I noted in what I said that although some people had said that this didn't look like a very effective way of addressing tough issues, nonetheless, the older methods we'd used didn't seem to be terribly successful either, so it was at least worth trying something which allowed quite deliberately every single voice to be heard as part of the process, and not to rely too heavily on particular cultures of conference life. So that's part of the background to that. And then, of course, I wanted to flag up some of the resources there would be around in looking at the divisive and sensitive issues in the background of the conference. So it was a chance to introduce the Covenant Working Group and the Windsor Continuation Group, the 2 groups that are in some sense doing some of the toughest work on the divisive issues and how we handle them. That was a chance for people to see who was involved in this and begin to get to grips with the agenda as they saw it. So they were invited to share some initial perceptions. The third thing I wanted to do yesterday was just to sketch a little bit further the vision that I hoped the conference could work with and seek to achieve. A vision of, as I think I put it, a unity that was achieved not by coercion but by consent, with all that that meant of challenges to everybody involved. But I said, as I believe, that that is a vision worth working for and a vision worth sharing with the whole of our ecumenical set of partners. So that was how I understood the task of the plenary and the first address that I gave and all the business that we did yesterday afternoon. Today we're launching in with some reflections on Anglican identity, the bishop and Anglican identity. And part of the background to that is the Working Party on Theological Education that was set up by the primates a couple of years ago. When I first became Archbishop, I said that one of my priorities would be theological education, both in Britain and more widely. That is, trying to set in train some of the processes, some of the institutions that would go on delivering real excellence worldwide in education, so that we were not dependent on a small number of particularly northern and western institutions, but could guarantee the same sorts of theological excellence worldwide. And as part of the work of that theological education in the Anglican Communion Working Group, various documents appeared which spelled out some of the expectations for ministerial education. And those of you who've seen the Lambeth Reader will have perhaps noticed that on pages 28 following, you'll see some of the background to this and what was said about the bishops as a target group in theological education there. And there are several pages of really rather formidable requirements for what makes a good bishop, which probably ought to make most of us want to resign straight away. But all of that is part of what is feeding in to today's discussion.